Hello and welcome back to On the Workbench. Today we're taking a look at the 06 Saab 9.3 and this very cracked radio antenna up here that's gotten to the point that I'm concerned about water leaking through. Still works just fine with the radio, and we're going to be replacing that today. But the twist is I've got the SportCombi version, and while I'm at it, I'm also going to be replacing these struts that help hold up the rear hatch. So that's our project for the day. The tools that you're going to need to do this job are going to be as follows. First of all, you're going to need some clean hands. If we're going to be playing with the headliner, make sure our hands are nice and clean. We don't need any dirt. You may want to put on some gloves for that, but make sure your hands are clean before playing with the headliner in the vehicle. And now to get the headliner down, we're going to need a couple just of these plastic non-marring trim tools so we don't cause any damage. And then we're also going to need a T27 Torx screwdriver to be able to remove the bolt that holds the cargo cover in place, or at least the mounting clips on the side the cargo cover clips into. We're also going to need something around a 5/32 flathead screwdriver for dealing with the shocks that hold up the trunk lid. Some RTV gasket for the radio antenna. And on the shocks, and then dealing with the clips on that, you're also going to want some safety glasses to make sure your eyes are safe while you're working around that you don't pop one of those clips off and then it goes flying in your face. That would be a very bad day. In the event your antenna connectors don't quite mate up correctly, then you may need some small gauge and slightly larger gauge wire strippers, crimpers, and some butt splices to be able to splice the old connector onto the new antenna, and maybe some electrical tape to help seal it up. It's in a precarious enough place that getting a good source of heat is kind of difficult up there without risking some other hazard. Maybe a heat gun being snuck in there is possible as well, but for me, just crimping it and using the tape will be good enough. And the final tool we're going to need is going to be well, in my case, I'm going to use a 55-gallon trash can, or however many gallons this is, as a rollaway cart. Nothing to do with Republic Services, but to be able to support the tailgate when it's up so I can replace the support shocks. A look at the parts that we're going to use today. We got a pair of replacement struts. These are part number 83347509. Gas spring rear. This was from Professional Parts of Sweden. And then the antenna. This is not an OnStar antenna, by the way. That has a different part number, 32101248. So now let's go over to the car and get started. To get started, you need to take all the junk out of your trunk. That's just going to make life easier for you so you can lay down and be able to have a nice clean workspace. And so this is obviously the SportCombi that I mentioned before, so this is going to be slightly different than the Sport Sedan. And I know this is a little bit more of a niche repair because the number of SportCombis out in the market or in the wild is far fewer than the number of Sport Sedans, but that's what I got, so that's what we're working on today. If I look straight up, there's a couple of clips, and all you got to do to remove them is turn them 90 degrees, and then they come out, and they look like this. We're not going to need to remove all the headliner. We just have to get enough space so that we can actually, see, 90 degrees, twist, turn, and they come out. So we can get enough separation to be able to actually get between the headliner and the roof to be able to actually get to what we need to get to. On the sides of the vehicle, there's a little clip here. We're going to use a small flat bladed screwdriver to pop these little pins out, just like this. And then we're going to come back with a trim tool to be able to pry them the rest of the way out. If you're lucky, you may be able to get them out by hand, like that. If you're not, you can use the trim tool just like this and pry it right out. And then we can pop that out. You're now going to need to repeat that procedure on the other side of the car because there's a pair of those. And now we're going to use our trim tool again. We're going to come back and pry out the light back here. And we'll set that aside. And then we'll take a T27 Torx screwdriver and remove the bolt that holds the cargo cover in place. And then now with that loosened, we should be able to pop out this panel here. It's going to be a little stiff. Then now for the radio antenna, we should be able to stick our hand up here, and let's see if we can see back here, and you'll be able to feel the bolt on the antenna. And then with your hand, you may be able to loosen it just like that. And there is our antenna bolt. Set that aside. We've got a couple wires here coming off. There's only one that really matters. And now after you've disconnected the wires, you should just be able to pull this out. Just like this, we'll have to be able to fish our wires up. Voila, here is our bad antenna. You can see this antenna actually had a second port on it here that we never used. And you can see exactly where it has set. There's a clip here that helps to seal everything up. And you'll notice there is a nice gasket around there to keep water out. So then we're going to use just a little bit of some water here to clean that up before we put in the new antenna. Let's take a look at the old and new antenna side by side here. So on the right here is the old one. You can see how this is just cracking and falling apart. And then on the bottom of it here, and this was starting to peel off here, there's a nice little rubber gasket here that went around and helped to seal off that space to keep water from getting in there, that our new part actually doesn't have. Now maybe I cheaped out on this because I've actually had this sitting on my workbench for probably about a year and a half, if not two, needing to get this replaced. And I can't remember if this was the OEM or this was one of the other recommended ones on E-Euro parts. But that's what I got. And so now my first concern obviously is going to be making sure that water does not get in. And I can also see that it's built just a little differently. This only has the one cable, so there is no OnStar ability here with this antenna. And number two, you can see how some of these little pieces here in the front and the back are made a little bit differently. But some of these little key parts here are the exact same for fitment. So it should fit just the same, but I'm going to put a small coat of RTV right around this hole to create a little ring that will hopefully seal that off, just to keep any water from seeping through when it's outside in the rain. And that is probably going to be good enough. Maybe I'll add just a little more over here on the side. And hopefully that's good enough. Now let's go to the car, and then we're going to drop this in. We're going to feed this down through the bracket and then drop this into the car. And remember, we want this like a shark fin, so this angled side points forward. The little recessed side goes to the rear of the car. The red clip that you may have seen here before has to get popped out. You can just pop it out from the bottom and just push it up, and then we can set in our new antenna. And that will go in just like that. And then now with the antenna seated, we're going to take the nut that came off. Bear in mind this does have a corner here that's cut out so that the antenna cord can come out the one side of the nut that's open. So we're going to have to make those sure that those are alignment. Unfortunately, it's kind of working in the shadows here between here. It's not too bad, you can do it. I just don't think I can fit my camera and my hands and a light in there all at the same time and talk while doing it, because a handful of this is going to be done just by feel. The removal of this was actually pretty easy. Just in case you're wondering, this is a 22 millimeter nut. So now I'm going to tighten this up here by hand. I'm not going to be able to put the camera in there, but it's just we're going to pull the headliner down and then get right in there and just work right in between. Hopefully you can see that's what it looks like now. I'm going to take a 22 millimeter wrench, put in there to get that bolt tightened up just a little bit further to make sure I've got a good, snug, tight, secure fitting. Don't forget to attach your antenna connector
and then you're good to go. Now in my case, I actually ended up buying apparently the wrong antenna because the connectors didn't fit, so I had to do a little wire splice off the old one, splice in the new one. I've already tested it, works fine, so I think I am good. Now on to thinking about the overhead struts. Now to think about replacing the rear shocks on the hold up the car, we're going to have, I'm just going to use my trash container here as a support because you're going to need something to support the weight of the hood, or I'm sorry, as the fifth door, as you can take off the shock, and then you're going to need a really small screwdriver. This is a 5/32 screwdriver to pop the retaining clip off. There's going to be a retaining clip in the front and a retaining clip in the rear. I'm going to pop the front one off first and then use the trash can to help support the weight of the door. Then I'll pop the rear one out just because the front one's easier to do, and there's a chance that the clip will just go flying back there. We'll catch it, put it back, or retrieve it, and then clip in the new one. So here we go. And there's the C-clip from the front side, so now I can pop the front side out. Let's take a look and see if you can see in there what we're looking at. So then after removal, you can see here's the back side that goes towards the front of the car. There's this clip here. I could take my screwdriver. There's a little ingress point here. Pry that clip back and then pop it off. And then from the inside here, I could get my screwdriver actually right through here. See if I can see that better. And then for the one closest to the door, I could get my screwdriver right in here and pop the C-clip off. That's what this is right here. And then I had to lift up the door just a little bit to get that off. And then now we got this out. Now time to put on the new one. Now you're going to want to do these one at a time, do the left side and then do the right side or vice versa, but don't do them both at the same time because that door is actually really heavy despite what you may think it weighs. Let's take a look side by side here at a replacement part. So here's the new one here. Professional Parts Sweden, we can see printed on it. We've got just about the same length. The new one's just a touch longer, but there's enough travel distance that's not going to matter. That should be just fine. And then with these clips on the end, these should just be able to pop right in. If you have to, you may need to stick a screwdriver here and just back these off just a little bit and then push them back down with your thumb. Same on the back, but you may just be able to wiggle that ball and it should just be able to pop right on that ball and it should be fine. These even came pre-greased. If yours don't have a little bit of lithium grease in it, I'd recommend putting just a little bit of lithium grease in it so you don't get any premature wear on your parts. So then you're going to install the new one, starting with the rear, and then go to the front side, and then it'll just be snap, snap, and then you're good. Because you're working with the snapper rings, make sure you got safety glasses on. You don't want one of those rings popping in your face. And there we go now with a couple of little blind clicks. Start at the back, start at the front, clip, clip. To be able to get the front one in, I had to be able to kind of raise the door with my back, a little slightly over raise, and then clip it in, and then good to go. Now we have to reassemble the headliner. Clips that we took out before. To lock that down, we only just needed enough space. We'll get in there with our hands to be able to get everything in place. So now a little quick reassembly and we'll have this job done. And so for the reassembly, we're just going to go back in reverse order of what we did before. We're going to put in the clips. We've got everything here all lined up, our tools out, and we're good. So you can do this whole job here in about 45 minutes, maybe a little less. So here's a little post-mortem look at the parts that we pulled off. Here's the antenna that came off. You can see just how cracked this thing looks. It's horrendous. It looks ugly. I was worried about water leaking in. There's definitely time to replace it. As far as the shocks, let's see if I can find the one here. There was some oil on the side of this one here. Maybe you can see it that was leaking out here. I believe this was starting to blow a seal at the bottom. And that's what would cause these shocks here to fail. As long as the temperature outside was above about 70 degrees, these would work just fine. Temperature got below about 70, it would work intermittently. If it got below 40, you basically had to manually lift the door. I think that's just because of the blown seal on it. It wasn't sealing correctly, and so therefore it was dangerous for my wife to operate or have the kids around or anything else. And if my wife's not happy with it, well, I mean, I guess I kept her from driving the car, which is nice because I love driving my Saab, but having a family means it's important to have everyone able to drive it, which is important to me. I try not to be selfish and only be able to get a car that I can drive. but it's also fun for my wife too, and now she can safely drive it with the kids and not worry about someone getting hit on the head with the rear door falling. And so with that, this job takes about maybe 30, 45 minutes by the time you do all the assembly and you do the left and the right side of these shocks and do the reassembly. So that's about it. Maybe you can do it in less time. My big time constraint was I ended up having to, like I said earlier, cut the connection off of here because the antenna that came off, here was the little sticker that was on it, 12756410. Had I got that one, it probably would have came with a bushing, or I'm sorry, rubber gasket on it, and I could have skipped the RTV, and I wouldn't have had to pull the wire connector off, put in a butt splice, crimp it, and then be able to make the connection. But it works, and I've tested it with the radio. It works just fine with the part that I used. So that was just a simple fix. A little extra time, but if you got the right part, and if I would have had the right part, would have went a little quicker. And so it's actually all in all a pretty easy job. The only real thing is you got to have just a little bit of reach and try to keep your hands clean throughout the whole process. And that's it. So if you found this video useful and interesting, give it a thumbs up. I'll put some links to some part numbers below. And have a great day. Bye.